And one. What's going on, everyone? This is the My Aggie Nation Podcast. We're back this week with the usual crew. With the Eagle, there's Alex Miller over there. What's going on, Alex?
Not a lot, Travis.
And the father. I swear, Zach. And sorry, but you look like you're a little slimmer and trimmer these days.
Doing what I can. I eat less with a child screaming all the time, so there's less time to sit and stuff my face.
That's fair.
I've been working out for about a year at this row. I'll give them a shout out anyways. This row house, and so they're actually classes that you go to and you row. But again, I've been doing it for a year.
Are you the coxswain?
That they don't use that one. No.
That's the person that tells you how.
I guess
what pace to row at.
Oh, okay. I got you.
The person with the microphone that's in the front of the boat.
I just call her coach.
Oh, well,
just coach.
You should call her coxswain next time. See how that works.
Yeah, I'll pull that one out next time.
Okay. So anyway, big matchup this week with A&M and Arkansas at AT&T Stadium. Probably about the most anticipated, exciting matchup the two has had, mostly because it's not at 11 a.m. It's at 2:30, and both teams are ranked. Zach, what's your initial thoughts on this matchup coming up, and are you as excited as I am about this matchup?
Well, yeah, it's going to be Texas A&M's. I would say it was going to be their first big test, right? But Colorado obviously proved that was going to be their first big test. Coming into this, I'm really interested to see what these offenses look like, because we've seen what KJ Jefferson and Arkansas can do, but they've got a couple of offensive linemen that are banged up as well. That came out yesterday that their starting center, and I believe one of their guards very well might be out for this ball game. Their starting center is the reigning SEC Offensive Lineman of the Week. So if they're missing those guys, that's huge. And then what is Texas A&M's offensive line going to look like? I mean, what we saw against New Mexico, there were guys that were banged up and bruised. Layden Robinson, if it was an SEC game, he very well could have played. With New Mexico, they gave him the week off after he got banged up against Colorado. But even at full strength, the Aggie O-line has been looking lost, man. And that was the big question coming into the season. The big question mark, I should say, for Texas A&M, even more so than at quarterback. What's this offensive line going to look like after losing 4 starters? And so far has looked pretty, I wouldn't even say pedestrian. I would say it's probably less than that, because they got absolutely bullied against New Mexico. Now you're heading into the teeth of SEC play. What are things going to look like against the Arkansas, not to mention the Alabamas of the world and the Auburns of the world? So there's a lot of question marks coming into this. I think we'll know a lot after this. Is A&M really the 7th ranked team in the country, or are they way overrated? And I think a lot of people are wanting to know that. And as well as, hey, Arkansas has played one legitimate opponent, and that was Texas. Completely ran them out of the stadium. But how good is Texas right now? Because who have they played besides Arkansas? Early on in the season, a lot of questions. These are the first 2 big opponents that either one of these teams has played, I guess you could say. And so really interested to see what shows up on Saturday.
It kind of sounded like you said first of the 2 pig opponents these have played. And it's really the only one pig opponent that A&M will have played so far. That being said, yeah, the offensive line is a big question mark for me. And it's interesting that the game before they play Arkansas is the one where Jimbo has to call out the physicality of the team, because Arkansas is always, even when they haven't been good, it's been a physical contest. I mean, I remember going back, wasn't it Arkansas 4 years ago that Myles Garrett got real banged up in, and that had him in and out of the season? It was always, and then think about, was it who was the Arkansas quarterback who just took a beating that one game?
One of the Allen brothers. I can't remember.
Austin Allen. He just took a beating that game and just stayed in and stayed the course. It's always been a physical game, and it kind of starts as they always say up front. I think that you saw how frustrated Isaiah Spiller was getting after only getting 1 or 2 yards a carry against New Mexico last week. And so, yeah, the offensive line is going to be, in my opinion, what makes or breaks A&M in this game, because I think Zach Calzada has proven he can manage the game just fine to win it. And you have Spiller and A-Chain in the backfield. You have wide receivers that can do their job. Defense is going to stand up strong. It's all down to the offensive line. Alex, do you think that this offensive line, do you think just inserting Layden Robinson, if he's going to be available, is enough to right the ship on that?
I think it does a lot. I think Layden Robinson is arguably A&M's second best lineman alongside or right behind Kenyon Green, and he plays right alongside Kenyon Green on that right side of that line. So yeah, I think that getting him back is significant for the Aggies. This is definitely a game, not to be cliche, but it's going to be one down in the trenches, especially depending on who's available and how healthy everybody is. I could see this game. One, I think it's going to be a classic down to the wire, who can grind it out type of game. These are the A&M-Arkansas games we've kind of just become accustomed to, I feel like, over the last decade. But, I could see this being like a 17-10 kind of defensive slugfest. Maybe if one team scores 20 points, that might be enough to win the game. It won't be as ugly, I think, as what A&M's performance against Colorado was. But Arkansas, very strong on defense, very veteran led. You think about guys like Bumper Pool, Jalen Catalon, probably one of the best defensive backs in the entire conference, if not the best. Third-year guy. He'll probably be drafted next spring. So, definitely getting a guy like Layden Robinson back is huge for A&M. We'll see how healthy he could be, but yes, Travis, I think that's a big benefit for the Aggies if he can play.
I'll be interested to see the matchup between graduate transfer defensive tackle John Ridgway, who had a really big game against Texas and was able to really disrupt some stuff on the offensive line, against freshman Bryce Foster at center. That's going to be probably the biggest challenge he's faced up front, right over the ball like that. And that could be one of the biggest matchups on the offensive line this weekend. So, and Alex, I want to go in and say you just called it going to be a low scoring slugfest. That means it's going to be aired out and a absolute shootout. That's just usually how these games goes.
Yep.
It's a question we seem to ask every year. This one, I think, makes a little bit more sense with everything in the top 25, but why is this game always so close? It just seems like no matter what the two teams present on paper, it's going to be a close game, whether it's a shootout or it's a 3 yards in a cloud of dust kind of game.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if it's Arkansas just gets up for this game. They know Jerry Jones is in the stands. Arkansas tends to travel pretty well. They kind of hype it up to be more of a home game for them, I feel like, in a lot of senses. But it's early on. Most years, that is really interesting, though. I can't quite put my finger on why these games have been close, but I guess maybe since it started out that way, it just it's just one of those games where it's gonna be a close one. Travis, you mentioned even in the years that Arkansas is not good, they're a really physical team. They've got really big guys that are hard to block, hard to defend. They're gonna go hard. But we've seen the last couple of years where A&M's just kind of out talented them. Finally catching up in some of those regards. But yeah, very interesting that this is always a close game. Zach, what do you think?
Since Texas A&M entered the SEC, every game that has not been close in this rivalry has been played away from Jerry World. So you got to think that the location has something to do with that, because again, every game that A&M's won them all since arriving the SEC, but all of the games that the Aggies have blown past Arkansas have been away from AT&T Stadium. But yeah, I think a lot of it, because it's generally the first SEC game of the year for both teams. And so you're still trying to sort things out and figure things out. I agree with Alex when he says Arkansas is always physical. Their lines are always physical. They've always got some talent up front, some big guys up front, and that has helped curtail whatever kind of advantage A&M might have there in a lot of ways. And this is looked at as a rivalry game. And if you're Arkansas right now, you see, hey, look, A&M has beaten us this many years in a row now. 9 years in a was it 9 or 8?
9.
9 years in a row now. My math is kind of fuzzy. I went to A&M. 9 years in a row now, and they're getting up for this game. And now you're coming in. You've got a full head of steam behind you. Suddenly, you got a brand new coach that has built this this following. And the Hogs fans are going to be out in full force. You're ranked for the first time in a long time, and they've been waiting for something like this. And so I have no doubt that Woo Pig Sooie will be really evident in Arlington, even with it being a neutral site game.
Yeah, I think rivalry is exactly what it comes down to. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago when we were at SEC Media Day, and a lot of the Arkansas players were saying the team that they wanted to beat most of that season, any season, was A&M. And with the history they have, I think that whether they admit it or not, it's played with the same intensity as a rivalry game. And I think that's exactly why those games have been so close and they've been so physical coming into that. So we're 3 games into the season. It's a small sample size, but it's the almost all of the entire non-conference sample size, save for the one cupcake game at the end of the year. Give me one player or unit that has impressed you more than you thought, and one that has you have some more questions to answer. And we'll go ahead and throw the offensive line off the table since we've already broken them down. So one group that has overachieved and maybe one that's underachieved. Zach?
I would think overachieved, you'd have to go with the secondary if you're talking about a group, not allowing over 100 yards passing yet. And I get that you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt. None of the teams, I would argue that Kenton State's a pretty good passing team. I mean, Crum, believe it or not, is a pretty good passer, all things considered. So I think the secondary has been a pretty pleasant surprise for a lot of Aggie fans so far this year. I know it gets overlooked a lot by that defensive line, but yeah, the secondary has performed very, very well. One that's been kind of meh, I would venture to say the wide receiving core. And I get they had a big game. You've got guys like Damon Demas had his big breakout game. Moose Muhammad with that insane catch that he made for a touchdown has been awfully impressive. But I mean, overall, there have been sometimes some plays that you're thinking, man, that guy should have caught that. So there's been some drops. Now, that's always going to happen, but it does seem, especially with a quarterback like Zach Calzada, if I can get that out right, has not had a lot of experience. You've got to be able to help him out on 50-50 balls. And that's been a big question for A&M for a long time. That, hey, where's the guy that can get up and get it and take it, basically pluck it out of the defender's hand, and he can beat him on a one-on-one matchup? You're still waiting to see that. I'm not saying that they can't accomplish that. I'm not saying that they don't have the talent to do that, but you're still kind of waiting for that big breakout game. Will it ever come with Zach Calzada, or is it going to come with Haynes King? Will it ever come this season? Because, again, you got to get a line that blocks for you in order to find open guys. But the wide receiving core, if we're talking about something other than the offensive line, has still got a lot to prove.
I'll go with I'll kind of dovetail off what you said, and I'll go with Leon O'Neal as someone who's maybe overachieved a little bit. And I'll say it not necessarily in his the stats and stuff he's put up, but he just seems like a much more mature player. There was always that one step forward, 2 steps back with him over the last 2 years playing, where he would make one good play and take 2 personal fouls in a game. And it was hard to say that he had a good game, even if he made some big plays. And he seems like he's been a really mature force and voice in that backfield, had a really big game against Kent State. And so I'd go with Leon O'Neal to go with maybe, I don't want to say if underachieving describes this as well, but when you go back to the wide receivers, you talk about drops. Anaya Smith has a decent amount of drops this season. And if you add in that muffed punt against Kent State, even though it didn't really affect the outcome of the game, it doesn't seem like he's just been quite as locked in as he had been last year. And so him, and then you want to throw the linebacking core back in there, because while the defense has been great, they have been gashed a few times up the middle by some runs, especially some quarterback keepers. And I'd be curious to see exactly how the linebackers respond against Arkansas this week. Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm gonna echo the sentiment you guys have had on the defensive backs, and Antonio Johnson's been the guy that's really stood out to me. I mean, the way that he covers guys. I mean, especially when passes are completed. I mean, there's hardly any yards after catch when he is covering a guy, and he's playing that nickel position. You know, it's probably more zone. You got to react and get covered on the fly. He has played phenomenal. He's been used in stunts and blitzes, made some plays in the backfield. He is a guy that has really come on as probably one of the better players on A&M's defense so far. A unit that has kind of been concerning is just special teams holistically. Nick Constantino has been solid at punter, which was reflected in him earning punter of the week honors this last week. He's been great. But other than that, A&M's had some mishaps. You know, you think about Seth Small's missed field goal against Colorado right after Haynes King went down. You know, that kept A&M from taking an early 3-0 lead. It was only about a 45-yard field goal. Seth's got the leg to make that. And then, you know, you think about the muffed punt that Anais Smith had. Last week, the two holding or the two penalties or the penalty call that negated the flag or the touchdown, I should say, against New Mexico. And then, you know, the snap when Caden Davis came in at the end of the game, you know, we've seen all around A&M's had some issues, even on kickoff. You know, Jimbo mentioned Caden, who can kick it out of the end zone every single time, kicking it short, not covering really well. You look back at some of these Arkansas games, special teams has been a huge reason why A&M's been able to pull out some of these close wins. I mean, you go back to 2017, Christian Kirk taking it to the house 100 yards to put A&M back ahead in the fourth quarter, and then Daniel LeCammer coming back later, making a 27-yard field goal to send it to overtime. And then you go to 2019, A&M holding on to a 1-point lead, and Seth Small comes in and makes a 50-yard field goal with just under 4 minutes left to put A&M up 4, forcing Arkansas to have to score a touchdown. You know, they can't rely on just a field goal at that point to win the game, or tie it. So, you know, A&M's got veteran guys on special teams. When you think about Seth Small, a senior, Caden Davis this third year, Connor Choate named 12th man. He's been really solid as a snapper. And then Anais Smith, you know, can A&M kind of clean it up on special teams, especially in a game like this that you know is probably going to be close, and that third phase of the game could really come into play down the stretch, as we've seen them time and time again.
For sure, Zach. Alex and I will give our thoughts on how this game will play out in the second segment. But before we close this one out, is this the year that Arkansas ends the streak?
Yes, I think Arkansas picks up a win on Saturday. You know, I just have not seen anything from this Aggie offensive line that makes me think they're going to be able to protect Zach Calzada. He's still, I'm not saying that he hasn't made some good plays under pressure, but I think he'll get picked off. I think he'll try and force the ball in there. He'll turn the ball over at some time. And I agree with Alex. I think it's going to be a pretty low scoring game. And turnovers are going to, whoever commits the most turnovers is going to lose the ball game. And I think the Aggies are probably going to have 1 or 2 of those at least. So, yeah, I think Arkansas wins it, touchdown or less, 7 points or less. But I think they do pick up a win on Saturday.
There it is. Well, we'll be back with another segment, and we have a treat for you. The SEC legend Bob Holt joins the podcast to help break down the Arkansas side of things. That's next on the My Aggie Nation podcast.